Hi, friends. I am so excited for this guest that we have today. I have my friend Amanda Feltman. Yay! And she is a stillbirth advocate. So today, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. I actually met Amanda. How did we meet, Amanda?
We met in person for the first time at Lindsay Henke, Nora's mom's book release party at a brewery. And remind me, what was your name changed to in the book, in her book?
Oh my goodness. What was my name?
Was
Was
it?
it Bethany? I think it was Bethany.
Yes, I think it was Bethany. And we
And
started
Steve.
talking. Yes. And we started talking at this book launch party. We have a friend in common, a mutual friend, and just all these other connections. And then I made you sign my copy of Lindsay's book, When Skies Are Gray, because you were a character in it. So I felt like I was meeting a celebrity.
It felt really funny to like there were a bunch of us that were like sign mine, sign mine. It was really funny. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
just okay. Thanks for making me feel important. But
Yeah, heck yeah.
anyway, that's how we met. And I had actually followed you on Instagram and I didn't even like realize that it was you when we first met. Like I've
That is
been
so funny.
so your handle is Orange AF Mama, right?
Hmm.
Yes. And so and I think it's so funny and clever that you have AF in your name, but it's actually not what most people would think
A
AF
little
is.
a little tongue in cheek. So
Yeah.
it's fun.
Was that like purposeful when you thought of it?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it was, of course.
Yeah,
It
it's
worked out
your
perfectly.
initials. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So I want to hear about your sweet baby girl, Juniper. Please tell us her story.
Yeah, so my husband and I met way back when, and we got married in July of 2017. And a few months later, we found out we were pregnant for the first time. And a little part of my story I'm going to share right away before we get to the pregnancy was so that November, so I'm a photographer and I went through training with a stillbirth organization to be a loss photographer. So I went through the peer companion training, which is wild because like once you hear my whole story, you're like, what? Like who does that, you know? But like who gets involved in something like baby loss unless you've experienced it yourself? And a little bit of that was I had a really good high school friend the year prior. Her first son died at home without any like prior medical complications or anything like that, like completely unexpected death. And I think that's kind of what prompted me to take this training because I wanted to help people. I was raised to use your talents to give back, not just always like to further yourself. So it's just really wild thinking back that I took that training. And I also want to point out that I feel like because I had that background, it has given me a more unique approach to being able to be so loud about loss and for being outspoken in this space. And I never want anyone to ever be like, oh my gosh, like, how did you know to like take smiling photos or, anything like that. It's really weird and really unique and really bittersweet that I had this background. So after I did that training, we found out we were pregnant for the first time around, and we did not know the gender. To keep going with the whole initial thing, Mitch, my husband, I call him baby daddy, and that was a way just to acknowledge that he was a dad because like so much doesn't change for the dads. So after Junior was born, I called him baby daddy. And when I was pregnant, I was like, I want a funny name for the baby, not just like baby last name, like everyone does, because that's not my jam. So he came up with the nickname Little Effer. I'm so inappropriate. It's terrible.
No, you're not.
It's terrible.
You're good.
It makes people like second, like kind of, oh, what did Orange AF, like little effer? What did you say? So I enjoy that. So around my 20-week scan, is when things started kind of, being questioned of she was measuring small. I never had a first trimester growth ultrasound. So then I was referred to MFM, maternal fetal medicine. My first pregnancy, you're just like, you go with the flow, you trust what you're being told, you don't really second guess a whole lot. I'm going to this MFM in the cities, I'm seeing all these different doctors. And so, you just kind of took it as you come. And in my experience, like prior to this whole situation, I kind of thought, like, oh, if you're pregnant and you're being seen a lot, something could go wrong. And living it was the opposite. My care very much felt like nothing can go wrong because we're seeing you so much. Like
Mm.
at ultrasound, some of the texts would be like, wow, you're having so many ultrasounds. Like, and people would be like, you're so lucky, all these ultrasounds. And I was just like,
Mm.
but am I? But I felt like nothing could go wrong. So I wasn't asking questions. I wasn't pushing for more answers, anything like that. So she was IUGR, her growth, she kept growing, but her rate of growth slowed down. Like she was, growing this and whatever. So I was being seen twice, first once weekly for ultrasounds, BPPs and NSTs at MFM, and then they bumped that up to twice weekly. So in comparison to a lot of people's stillbirth stories, mine is unique in the sense I was being watched closely.
Yeah.
And then I was also already involved with a stillbirth organization. Like there's this basically it just illustrates this gap in care. So I was 38 weeks and 2 days, and we were going to my last MFM appointment, my last growth ultrasound, in the cities. We live kind of outside of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul metro area. And my husband was with me. Thankfully, he didn't come to a lot of appointments. And, we heard those four words no one ever wants to hear, especially not at full term
Mm.
pregnant. And you don't ever expect to hear those words either. Um, and that's when our life changed from that before to after. And I even remember not wanting to leave that ultrasound room because then it felt like it was going to be real. Like kind of felt like until then it was just a bad dream. And so then again with this background in training, I knew that I was going to have to give birth. Like there was no question about it. I know a lot of moms in this situation are like, wait, what? I have to do what?
Yeah.
Like, and so like, I'm the only one that can say this, but that's a silver lining that I like had this wherewithal, that I had this knowledge. So we stopped home to grab our stuff. I remember just bawling, taking my nursing bras and nursing tanks out of my hospital bag. I'm like looking at the diaper
Yeah.
bag I
Oh
had
my God.
packed and just being like, wait, like I don't need all of this. And I like had some onesies and I was just like, this doesn't
Mm.
seem like dignified enough. So I brought her Clementine Swaddle, and we didn't know she or here. I actually thought we really thought she was going to be a boy so much. And actually, this is really wild. I was actually just telling this to a mom the other day. 2 nights before Junie was born, I actually had a dream that I was in the hospital and I had just given birth and I was holding her and I'm like looking down at her, but like the idea, how dreams, there's just kind of this idea. The idea was like, but you don't get to keep her, like she's not yours. And I took that dream to mean that it was going to be a boy because I was holding a girl. And like so weird again, like after the fact to think back to that. But because of having that dream, I had a friend come visit me the day before Ginny was born. And she had an older daughter and she had just had her second child, her son. And I was like, oh my gosh, it could be a girl. And I have no bows for her. So
Oh.
that's the blessing of that dream was that she brought a bunch of bows, and the gold bow that we ended up
Mm.
putting on her was her daughter Lydia's prior. So that's
Mm.
kind of fun. Like I have a picture in Junie's baby book of Lydia wearing that same gold bow for like a Christmas a few years prior. So that was just funny how that served me as well. So we went to the hospital. Junie was born at 7:41 p.m. that night. I did, before I got induced, I asked for an epidural. I didn't want to feel anything. I already felt so tortured, and I knew that I was going to need every ounce of energy to give birth and every ounce of energy to grieve after the fact. So I wanted any pain relief I could get to not to have any pain relief I could have to help handle everything I was going through. Um, it was really wild. There's not really good word for it, but it felt final and real when she was actually born and she was silent.
Mm.
And I think up until that point, we were still holding out hope that the machines were broken or
That they
the
were wrong.
doctor was
Yeah.
wrong. Yeah, like you're holding out hope until that moment. And then also just to illustrate how sure we were she was a boy when so I'm holding her, I'm all scrunched up looking down at her, and my doctor is literally stitching me up. And I question her stitching up female anatomy because I'm looking at this baby and I'm like, you said it was a girl. This is clearly a boy. I saw like the little stump, the cord stump, and
Yeah.
then like her parts were kind of swollen, and the way I'm like bunched up, I thought it
Like,
was a
wait.
boy. Like that is how sure that our
You
little
thought it was a
effer
boy.
was gonna be a boy. Yeah. So like I'm looking down at her and I'm telling my doctor, like, no, like even in this like hugely traumatic, terrible moment, I'm like, you told me this was a girl and it's definitely a boy, and like you shouldn't be stitching me up. And she's like, no, no, that's a girl. That's a girl.
Yeah.
So so that was just kind of I guess a funny, which I
Yeah.
think started a lot of if anyone does follow me, I do a lot of dark humor, and a big kind of mantra of mine is if you don't laugh you'll cry, and so I think
Hmm.
that's kind of where it started, was right there. So after she was born, our families came in. I had a photographer friend come, like especially because I had this training. We spent about 24 hours with her. We stayed the night. And it was just the weirdest time, really. Um, like when you're in this space, and I'm sure you know a similar feeling of like not wanting that time to be over, because then you know you're going to do the worst thing ever in the world, and that's leave the hospital without your baby
Mhm.
just right after you gave birth, um, and to never see them again. But you also want that time to last forever because it's the only time you're ever going to get with that baby. And even though our nurses were like, there's no rush, like it felt like we were just in this rush. And if I could go back, the one thing I wish I would have done was to take away any thoughts of judgment that I had from other people, that because I was like, oh, we're taking pictures. Oh, we're rocking her in the rocking chair. We gave her a bath. I like felt really ridiculous, but I asked to put a diaper on her because we were just going to wrap her up in the clementine swaddle. And I was like, that doesn't feel right to have her like all the
Wear
way
that one.
naked.
Yeah.
And actually, like this is something that not a lot of people know, but even though they've died, some of their bowels and things leak out
Hmm.
after that. So it was actually really good. We didn't have like a little poop on the blanket. But I wish I could have just like taken that judgment that was always in my mind of like, what are people going to think that we like, what are they going to think that we did these things? Would they have done the same? Like, what are you supposed to do? And it's so messed up because you're not supposed to be in this situation.
Hmm. Can I ask why, how come? So I only got a few, we only got like the morning time. Gracie passed at 4 a.m. and they had to take her by like noon.
Hmm.
So you got a full 24 hours with you. Was there a
Hmm.
cuddle cot? How was she able to stay that long with you?
Sure, sure. So we did have a cuddle cot. We actually ended up not using it. Ironically enough, I knew the family, the baby that had placed the cuddle cot at our hospital. Like I remember Macklin, Ashley's son, Macklin,
My
our friend in
my bestie
common.
Ashley.
Yeah. Um, they had placed the cuddle cot in the hospital. So like
Mhm.
Macklin's name was in the room with us. But it was just interesting because I remember hearing about his funeral, and it was so bright and colorful and such a celebration of life, even though I didn't know her then. So we had a cuddle cot. We didn't use it. We did like keep her in the room with us overnight, but I wanted her like in the bed with us. And like I
Mhm.
knew it was going to make noise. And I didn't want that.
Yeah.
And I also like when people were holding her and stuff, I didn't want her like connected to anything because there's like tubes, like it's weird. I will say something on our side with that was that she was full term and she was not gone very long before she was delivered. So in saying that, and of course, this is always the least fun part to talk about, she was like not really deteriorating yet. In some cases, babies have been gone longer before birth. Their skin starts
Okay.
peeling, or if they have any sort of complications of fluid on the organs or fluid under their skin and things like that. And I think also having that background and like knowing I was able to make more of an informed decision than some people are. You just kind of like go with it. So I hope that kind of makes sense. So we didn't actually have her cooled. I think we might have had some ice packs on her at some point.
Okay.
But I felt comfortable and able to because she was kind of changing, but she was not changing as fast. I also think like given Gracie's situation versus Junie's, there is such a gap, which is really interesting because like if I think of Gracie with a heart defect, I know a lot of babies that could have been stillborn because of that heart defect.
Mhm.
Like so it's just interesting, but because Junie was stillborn, there was like this set of rules applied to her and like
Okay.
stillborn
Yeah.
babies really exist in a really weird gray area because like they died, but they were dead before they were born, so they weren't actually a real person. So, like,
Mhm.
you only get a certificate of birth resulting in stillbirth, and that really only functions like a death certificate, but you don't fill out a birth certificate and a death certificate. There's no medical examiner, there's no coroner that's involved in it.
Mm.
Whereas Gracie was technically, alive versus Junie wasn't alive, air quoting that. So Gracie had a very different set of laws, essentially. So
Interesting.
that
So
does make a
wrong.
difference. It's so screwed up. It's so screwed up. Yeah. But as far as my knowledge of everything, that would be a lot of it. And then also like Gracie's condition probably necessitated it a little bit more. And then talking about Junie, so it's the most bittersweet thing that she died so close to birth. Her autopsy supports that she died no more than 24 hours before she was delivered. And all of the evidence points to about 12 hours before she was born, is when she died. My
Mm.
appointment where we found out she died at was 8 a.m. in Edina, and she was delivered at 7:41 p.m. that night.
Wow.
So that also explains like people see her pictures and think she's just a sleeping newborn
Mhm.
because she was just so close. That part always extra sucks to talk about.
Yeah. So, how did you first learn about placental size as a risk factor, and how did that shape your journey?
Yeah, that's a huge part of my story. So when I was halfway through then my next pregnancy, so Junie died and was born August 9th of 2018. In May of 2019, so I was about halfway through my second pregnancy with what we know now as our daughter Coral. We did not know gender. She was little F number two. I was volunteering to be on a parent panel to educate nurses on what to do when it comes to bereavement and loss. And so that's just if you can think about a lot of this stuff in general, that's very reactive to these situations. And so I kind of went from that. I'm still in that space of supporting grief and validating grief. And I go and photograph families that have had losses, but I very much want to be more proactive to prevent these tragedies from happening, from preventing the need to raise funds for more cuddle cots and things like that. So this was very much bereavement focused. So I was on this parent panel with Anne. She's Elijah's mom and her husband, David. Elijah had been stillborn almost exactly a month before Junie, full term. And unlike Junie, he was a big baby. So while we were driving to this parent panel, it was actually at Face Lodge in Wisconsin. We started, as you do, swapping stories. So I am telling her about Junie's story and that she was growth restricted, and they said due to placental insufficiency. And it was like a light bulb went off, and she starts like talking so excitedly and like fast of just like passion of, oh my gosh, I could help you like find out answers for this.
Mm.
So after Elijah had died, she was consuming any media she could about stillbirth and about she's very science minded. So she was looking into a lot of the science and like, hello, babies shouldn't just die like this. Like this is unacceptable. She listened to a podcast episode with Dr. Harvey Kleiman, who is a placental researcher at Yale, and he was talking about the placenta size as being a cause of stillbirth. And Anne was like, how have I never heard this before? How is this not being looked at? And so she went back and got Elijah's records, sent him off to Dr. Kleiman, and found out that Elijah had died from a very small placenta, and he was a large baby. So that shows that just tracking baby size doesn't always mean the placenta is also doing well. So she encouraged me after I told her about IUGR and preeclampsia and measuring small and all of these things. She was like, you need to send your records off to Dr. Kleiman. And sure shit, sorry, I don't know if I can swear. Sure shit,
Yep.
Junie had a very small placenta. Junie's placenta was in the 0.1 percentile for size.
Wow.
And given all of the BPPs, NSTs, all these growth scans, that was never caught. That was not caught.
Yeah.
And so if you're new to all of this, thinking about the size of the placenta is like having a gas gauge for your gas tank. You would not hop into your car and expect to drive cross country and just guess on how far you can get without knowing how much gas you have in the tank. So like not knowing the placenta size is like not having a gas gauge. And just looking at the size of the baby is not enough to know how the placenta is doing. They are independent of each other, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So finding out Junie had a small placenta was like, oh my gosh. And it was, I will say, it was really hard to think about going through that process. It felt like requesting my records and sending off slides, things like that. I was like, something's going to come back and they're going to say it was your fault. It was, that time you took a sip of wine when you were in the second trimester, or
Yes.
you rode on a four-wheeler, on Labor Day weekend, everything like that. Um, and just in general, so everyone is educated after a delivery when there is a loss, and sometimes when there is NICU complications. In the United States, most hospitals' policy is to send the placenta to pathology. The placenta then they take cuts of it, kind of like it when you cut down a tree, you can see the rings on the tree.
Hmm.
That's generally how like looking at a placenta is. And so then they can look at these slides under a microscope, look at the red blood cells, look at the white blood cells, and all of these things can tell them so much information about your baby and about your baby's health and about your pregnancy. I don't remember the statistic right now, but the placenta is almost it's a large statistic, can tell you the cause of death, especially way more informative than an autopsy will ever be.
Mm.
So knowing Junie's placenta was small was, step number one, and it took away so much guilt
Guilt.
from me. And very much just like told me like you did the best you could at the time with the information you were given. And then here I am pregnant again. My first pregnancy was high risk, closely monitored. There was when I went into the second pregnancy, my OB asked me like, what more can we do for you? And I was like, you can't, aside from putting me on monitors 24 hours a day, like there is no more you can do. And that was really hard. Like pregnancy after loss, as you know and have experienced, is such an experience in trust, like blind trust and hope.
Blind. Yeah.
And so here I am halfway through, and I learn about this, and I learn about that there is a tool to measure the size of the placenta during pregnancy on ultrasound. It takes less than 2 minutes. It's it's not invasive. It's not like you're asking a pregnant woman to go through an MRI. It's not doing I can never say the amnio when you take the fluid.
Amniocentesis.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm like, I can get the first part.
yeah.
It's nothing like that. It's just a one more measurement on ultrasound. We measure so much on ultrasound. So here I am now, like armed with this information of like, yes, like we need to look at this. This can give me,
Answers.
some sort of
Yeah.
reassurance that maybe this pregnancy can make it. And I had told my OB, don't use that word in pregnancy after loss. And so then as a result of just like local and being connected, so Anne had gotten to know Dr. Harvey Kleiman, and then he was actually in Minnesota for a stillbirth summit. And because of connections made there, I got to go because my MFM, I was going to the same MFM that advised Junie's pregnancy, which was really
Mm,
not awesome. Like, I'm like,
mhm.
what are you? This ultrasound means nothing to me. You did all this and my baby died. Like, okay. But because of all these connections, I was able to go to the U of M MFM, and a doctor there measured Coral's placenta. And to see that her
Beautiful.
placenta size was in line with her size at that point was just like, I just
Oh.
remember bawling
Yeah,
happy tears of like, maybe we can do this. So
yeah.
that was really wild. Yeah.
It's kind of like my, with my second pregnancy going into the cardiologist, and they did an a
Echo.
cardiogram, and yeah,
Or yeah. Yeah.
and saw that all 4 chambers were there, and yeah, it was just like, oh, okay, we can keep
Yeah. Like,
going, we can keep moving
yeah.
forward. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't take all the worry and stress away, but it just
No.
a little bit of
It gives you just like a little,
breather. Mm,
yeah, it's almost like when you get on one of those moving walkways at the airport, you're like, okay,
yes.
something's helping me a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't have Coral's placenta measured until I was probably like 32 or 34
Okay.
weeks too. And so I had gotten through that pregnancy already. It was
Mm,
one breath at a time, let me tell
mhm,
you.
mhm. This all led to Measure the Placenta. So
Mhm.
how did that come to be?
Yeah, so Anne is our director of Measure the Placenta. So Measure the Placenta was her baby for sure. She actually had initially like kind of called it the Elijah Project in memory of
Mm,
her son. And so we connected through this parent panel. We started connecting with other moms, started talking to other moms sending their reports off to Dr. Kleiman or other placental pathologists. Oh my gosh, my baby had a small placenta too. And so we started banding together and we're like, what can we do to fix this? How can we get this standard of care updated? It was kind of fall of 2021. We officially started the group called Measure the Placenta, and we are just an all volunteer advocacy team. Some of us are lost moms and some of us are not lost moms. We have a few actually supporting us that are small placenta baby survivors, which
mm,
is really wild and also very powerful to hear about too, of just how important that like checking the size of the placenta is, because a small placenta is a risk factor for stillbirth. And it also correlates with other complications like preeclampsia, NICU time, cerebral palsy, all sorts of things a small placenta can be attributed to. So we're an all volunteer team. A few of us are in Minnesota, but we've got people all over. Our goal is to get placenta size measured as a part of standard prenatal care.
beautiful.
Hey, friend. Grief is heavy, especially when it's the loss of a child. It's messy, unpredictable, and let's be honest, sometimes it just sucks. That's exactly why I created the Grief Relief Journal for Child Loss, a free resource to help you put words to the ache, process the impossible, and find even the smallest moments of relief. This journal isn't about fixing your grief because, let's be real, that's not how this works. It's about giving you a space to be exactly where you are, raw, real, and unfiltered. And the best part? It's completely free. Just grab the link in the show notes and download it today, because your grief deserves to be heard, not hushed.
Why isn't estimated placental volume a standard part of prenatal care yet?
It's a great question. There's a lot. I had never really experienced much in the healthcare system prior to this. So it's been a lot of, and many of us haven't, it's been a lot of learning on our feet, but it comes down to the system and the policies and money and insurance. Um, so you go to your doctor and you're like, hey, I want you to do this measurement. And they're like, well, ACOG doesn't tell me I have to, so I'm not going to do it. And they don't want to ever like practice outside of their normal because of the potential of liability and being sued. And it's really frustrating when it is something so easy and simple. And let me be very clear too. What we're advocating for is not for EPV, estimated placental volume measurements, to be the end all be all of assessing a pregnancy. It is just another tool in the toolbox. It is another data point that you can watch for, just like we screen your blood pressure, we screen weight gain. We look at all of these things. We check the heart rate on the NSTs. We look at baby's activity on a BPP. It's just another one of those tools. And honestly, those like BPPs and NSTs they don't hold much predictive value. They kind of are just a picture at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And anything can happen after that. So it really comes down to the systems and policies and things like that. So what we're doing to overcome that is petitioning to ACOG, working with other policy makers, state health departments. We'd love to see the FEMUR committee exist, especially here in Minnesota again, and every state, and that's to just investigate the cause of fetal and infant deaths. We have started attending different public health conferences. Two members of our team were at the AmChimp conference in Washington, D.C. last week, which was really powerful. So that's what we're doing. We send letters, we share our message on social media, we show up in loss groups and things like that to help people know that this is something they can ask for. If you do try to request these measurements and they won't do it, one, don't be surprised, and two, don't give up hope. One thing you can do is ask them to document your request and then their refusal in your chart. And sometimes that is enough of a push for them to be like, okay, I'm just going to take this measurement. Like it's 3 measurements on ultrasound. It's the length, width, and height of the placenta. You plug those measurements into a free pregnancy app called Merwin's EPV calculator, and that will calculate the estimated percentile size of the placenta. So just like when you have a living child and you take them to the pediatrician and they measure their height and their weight and they check their head and they look at the percentiles and they always show you the graph, that's exactly what this is like. And so if you took your child to the doctor and suddenly they went from the 70th for height to like the 5th percentile, there would be like,
Alarms.
yeah, red alert, red alert.
Yeah.
Let's take action, right? Like we're going to investigate this. So that's what we're asking for. Same thing.
Yeah.
The placenta, if you check it at the 20 week and it's in the 70th, and then you check it at 30 weeks and it's the 5th, that is cause for concern. And that doesn't mean get the baby out right now the second. This just means another piece of information to add to that general clinical picture of the pregnancy in order to make the best decisions to have the best birth outcome.
So we met, was it last week when the kids had spring break? The kids played and we talked, and you told me about this little girl named Margot and her story. And I was wondering if you could tell our listeners about her.
Yeah, absolutely. So another piece I don't think I've really mentioned yet here is count the kicks, and how it is so important as a stillbirth prevention measure to track your baby's patterns of movements while you're pregnant. That it was one other major piece of the puzzle with Juniper that I was not informed on. I forgot to show her a picture. So it was not ever on purpose, but when Junie was first born, I just wanted to share her pictures in a normal space, in color and all of that, and realized that like the world just doesn't cope with our grief very well. So I started sharing on Instagram. And one thing that I'm always mentioning on Instagram is how she slowed down the day before she died and how tracking those movements is so critical. So that is something I've shared on Instagram for a while. For a little over 4 years ago, one night, I got a message from a mom named Kathleen, and she's like, I don't even know why I'm following you. I don't know why I'm messaging you, but I am 34 weeks pregnant. I just had an appointment a few days ago, but like my baby's not moving right, and I can't shake Junie's story. And I was like, go in. And she's like, well, my husband's like, everything's fine. I'm like, nope, go in. So she goes in, they check her out with those tests, send her home, and they're like, nope, you're good. Next morning, she messages me again and she's like, I feel like Junie's talking to me and my baby's not moving the same still. Like something doesn't feel right. Something feels off. I'm like, go back in. Go back in. Like you stay there until you feel reassured. She goes back in. They got her on the monitors. They tried to get her off and she was like, nope, trust in my gut. Junie's story, it sounds crazy, but I follow this girl on Instagram. I gotta stay here. Over the day, then all of a sudden, she tanked on the monitors. They did an emergency C-section. They got her out. I have chills. They got her out wonderfully alive. Her name is Margot. She lives in Ohio and she's just over 4 years old. And she had a true knot in her very short cord, which explains why her movements were slowing. So Kathleen says often and frequently that Margot would not be here if she didn't know Junie's story and if Junie hadn't encouraged her to go in to be seen. So if anything good can come out of my daughter's death, it's that she's making a positive impact on this world. And it really goes to show that stillbirth can be prevented in some cases with these simple tools.
So, for parents who have experienced stillbirth and are searching for answers, what advice do you have for them?
Sure. So if you have experienced the stillbirth of your child and you were basically told sometimes these things just happen, baby looks perfect, we don't know, there's nothing more you can do. Sometimes even parents are talked out of autopsies and then you're just in that state of shock and trauma at that point that you're, again, like I said, you're just kind of like at the whim of others because your brain is not functioning. So if you are weeks, months, days, years out from the death of your baby, you can still find answers. And like I said, it is hard. It is a very emotionally draining process. And for me, in my experience, it's also one of the best things I've done in this time and space since Junie died. Because, like I said, it has released so much guilt for me, and as just like a active person wanting to be proactive, and especially given that like close monitoring I had, I'm like, what I want to do something else because this shouldn't have happened, and I don't want it to happen again. So having those answers gave me something that I could do, something that I could act on, and being able to like read that report and things like that, just it puts a number with things. It really showed me how the system failed me and that I didn't fail my daughter. I did the best I could at the time with the info I was given. I wasn't told about kick counts. They did not look at the size of her placenta, all of that. So if you haven't had answers, if you're wondering, did my baby die because of something with the placenta and even something with the cord? Highly recommend looking into doing a placental pathology. Also to add, Junie's placenta was like studied by a pathologist at our hospital, and they said nothing was concerning. And so I went off that for so long and I just thought like, wow, we'll never know. We'll never know what happened. And like, I don't like the word acceptance ever because this is not how it should be. And I will die on that hill of like, this is not what should have happened. But I feel like being able to be given something so concrete as to her cause of death helped me accept it. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Mhm.
But it versus this, like, your mind is always ruminating and it will always be probably forever, but it helps kind of just like pull that in a little bit of like, okay, so here is something we knew, and now here's something I can do about that. And here's information I can share with others so that it doesn't happen to them. Like in the stillbirth prevention advocacy space, something I always try to do is to be the person I needed when I was pregnant to prevent the tragedy. And also by saying that if you are a lost parent and you don't have the capacity, the energy, the emotional capacity to do something like this, there is absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. Everybody has a different ability to approach these things. If you never want to talk about your baby and the most you're doing is listening to podcasts, I am so proud of you. You got to do whatever is the least worst for you right now to survive this.
What helped you most in your grief and moving forward and healing? Like, what's the thing that's helped you most?
I think there's three big things, and that was sharing Junie loudly and proudly in such a public space.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like using that space, my Instagram account at Orange AF Mama, to like tell people what wasn't serving me well and to explain what could serve me better to make this least worse. Because nothing anyone could do could make it better. Nothing, no amount of placental pathology is going to bring her back either. But we can talk about her. We can talk about the work that we're doing. It's okay to see their pictures, things like that. That kind of leads to the second biggest thing I would say that has helped me cope and survive this, and that is connecting with other moms.
Yeah.
I hated right away when people are like, "Oh, I know someone else that went through that," or "Hey,
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
give you their number," or whatever. Because like actually at that point, I needed to search those people out on my own because being told that so much made it feel like, oh my God, this happens to other people. Other people have felt this pain. And it was like, I'm an empath. It was too much pain for me to also absorb.
Yes.
I needed to find those connections myself.
Yes.
And also, like, I remember someone being like, oh, this happened to her 12 years ago. I'm like, what is she going to be able to provide me other than, oh, she had more kids, it's all better, like that? No, that is not what I need right here right now. So by sharing on Instagram, I started hashtagging like stillborn still beloved, and then I started finding this network of lost moms, dead baby moms all over the world, and that has been the most powerful thing to like get me to the next day. Like I remember very vividly the second wedding I photographed after Junie had died, texting a mom, her daughter had died the day after Junie, or was born the day after Junie, and she died later that week. Um, and I texted her, I'm just like, I don't know if I can do this.
Mm.
I need some encouragement. And, she was right in those trenches with me, and that made such a difference. And then like that most definitely led into pregnancy after loss and PAL, because that is the second hardest thing I've ever done, was be pregnant again 2 times. And so being pregnant alongside other lost moms was helpful in the sense that we could talk about those vulnerabilities and those fears. And it is really hard. I'm getting better at it, I like to think, but it's really hard to talk to moms that haven't experienced loss about a lot of these things, because they don't get it. Thank goodness they don't get it. But yeah. And so then the third biggest thing I would say is doing the stillbirth prevention advocacy work and being that person I didn't have. And, nothing's going to change until people make changes and speak up about it. It's just overall stillbirth and baby loss is such a stigmatized and shame topic. And for so long, it's been so silenced and dismissed. Our babies lose their personhood because of all these things. And so in the stillbirth prevention space, I am able to do that and make those changes. And I can't stop every preventable stillbirth from happening, although we would all love to do that. But what I can is make this world ever so slightly less worse for the next person that does experience it.
You're amazing, right?
I learned from the best. Takes one to know one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how can listeners support Measure the Placenta and help push for change?
First, follow us on social media. That is where we're given the most, quick updates, posts you can share it with your friends. Again, change won't happen until the people that aren't affected by this also care. A lot of times in like the going through the legislation advocacy and stuff, we're dismissed because we're just grieving moms. And like, no, we're not just out there with our pitchforks. Like, we're angry. Like, yes, we are angry, but we're also educated, informed, research supported, like there's all these other things to it. But it is very helpful for others that haven't experienced it to say, hey, this happened to my friend and I care deeply about it also, because sometimes that is taken more seriously. So if you're on our social media, if you want to get on our email newsletter, that's another great place to get updates, especially because I know some people are not on the social media space these days. Get on our email newsletter list. You can sign our online petitions. We have a change.org petition that we're working on. We'd also encourage you to follow other organizations that are doing this amazing work, like Count the Kicks. They're on Instagram at Count the Kicks US. Another wonderful organization is Push for Empowered Pregnancy. They're doing so many good things to improve birthing outcomes for people in the United States, and including really focusing on bridging that gap when it comes to diversity and the effect that racism has on our healthcare system, which is another big gap that really needs to be addressed.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah, you can join in our letter sending campaign to ACOG and state health departments, all of the above. And just probably the biggest, easiest, least amount of effort is just to share with others that babies don't slow down in pregnancy and that stillbirth can be prevented at times, because that is a fatalistic view our society has. And there's no such thing as a detriment to being labeled this anxious pregnant woman by going in to be seen if you notice, a change in movements. And ACOG even has a bulletin out that you do not leave until you feel reassured. And
Amen.
whatever that level of reassurance looks like, that's for you to decide. That is what they're there for. That is the care they're providing. So just share that, the importance of monitoring those movements. And I always have to add there, you did the best you could at the time with the information you had. If you, experience like I did, I noticed less movements and I didn't know to say anything. So please, easier said than done, but try to remove any guilt you have around that.
Yeah. So good. Well,
Yeah.
Amanda, you are a light in this world. And Juniper is the most beautiful tangerine thing.
And her big old bow.
Oh
The
my
bigger the bow,
gosh.
the closer to God and Junior.
Amen.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on, for sharing all of the amazing work our organizations and so many wonderful people are doing. I hope that we are making the world a better place in memory of our babies.
That's the goal. That's the mission, right?
Yeah.
Speak up. Be loud.
Loud about it all.
Yeah, loud about it all. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.